Welcome to the Pooch Parenting Podcast, a podcast for parents with dogs. I'm Michelle Stern, a certified professional dog trainer, mom, and former teacher. Living with kids and dogs at the same time can feel like a circus. I know because I lived it too. Join us as we interview a variety of experts and parents to discuss topics that will make parenting with dogs easier, safer, and less chaotic. Also, you can love living with your dog again. I'll always keep it real, which might even mean that you hear the messiness of life in the background on occasion, but at least you know you're not alone. In today's episode, I interview Jessie. She's a mom of a super anxious Boston Terrier and toddler, and she shares with us her story of how she was able to parent both of them at the same time without losing her mind. I would like to apologize for the sound on today's podcast. I was experiencing technical difficulties with my computer and had to record it on my phone, so I do apologize. I hope you enjoy it.
Thank you for having me. So our dog Brody, he's now 8. He was 5. He's a Boston Terrier. So he was 5 when my son was born. And he's always been anxious. He's just, he's a rescue. He's been through some stuff. He's just always been sort of high strung. So both my husband and I made the mistake of thinking, oh, he'll be fine when the baby, it'll be fine. It was not fine. When we brought the baby home, Brody was very concerned, worried. He did a lot. He was very worked up, overexcited, extra hyper aroused. And he, cried a lot, would whine, would sort of try to smell and lick the baby all the classic signs of I'm not sure about this, he was having.
Okay.
And on top of that, I had really horrible postpartum anxiety. So when we brought the baby home, and the first thing the dog did was try to jump up and see the car seat, I didn't even laugh because it was so real to me at the time, but I feared that my dog was going to eat my baby. I hid in a room with the baby for a couple of days because I was convinced that the dog was going to eat my baby.
Right.
Now, a Boston Terrier, he has teeth, but he's small. He's a small dog. He's 23 pounds. So, even my mother, who is not a dog person, was like, Jess, it's probably
but it's not rational. It's not like
it's not.
It's not. And it's not your fault. It's chemicals in your body, and
the same thing with Brody. His anxiety. It's not a conscious decision on his part to be anxious. So, the first few weeks of my son's life, I hid for a little while, and then we just started tossing treats whenever the baby did anything or nothing. Just whenever the baby was around, here, have a treat. You lay down at my feet while I'm feeding the baby, have a treat, have 10 treats. And then especially when the baby did anything, weird, like cried or maybe whatever noises they made.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was a little bit helpful. He started to calm down a little bit, not be so on edge all the time.
Right.
He didn't really seem to have a lot of interest in the baby, which is good.
Mm-hmm.
But he did start to relax. So the thing that brought me to all this extensive management is when my baby was about 6 weeks old, we were home with my parents for Christmas. And my best friend came over with her son, who was 15 months at the time. And so we are with Brody in my parents' house. There are a lot of strange people over. There are children over. There are babies. I had Brody on a leash and a harness to try to keep, because I thought that would, keep everybody safe. And he had a bone, a chew toy. And so at one point, the 15-month-old came running over to Brody and reached for the chew toy. And when they say lightning fast, Brody nipped his hand.
Mm-hmm.
Thankfully, no skin was broken. Nobody was seriously injured. a quick kiss and a cuddle, and the toddler was fine. I was not fine. I was not fine. My sister still says that, like, she remembers just all my biggest fears on my face, and it happened. So at that point, because I'm drowning in postpartum anxiety, I'm already nervous about this dog. I'm trying to figure out, how to have a baby and a dog and do all this. And I wanted to give him up. I wanted to call the rescue and have him get picked up.
Yeah. That's totally normal.
My husband, tried to convince me, let's see what our options are. Maybe we can call a trainer. Maybe we could, try some medications. And after a couple of weeks, I came around to that. So we saw our vet, and Brody started taking Prozac.
Mm-hmm.
And I started taking anxiety medication as well. So that did make a difference as far as his anxiety levels. He seemed to sort of take the edge off, made his fuse a little bit longer.
Yeah.
So we started doing that. And then that is when I bought the book by Lisa Edwards, Please Don't Bite the Baby and Please Don't Chase the Dog.
Yeah.
I don't even remember how I came across it, but I bought it. And I mean, I couldn't read it fast enough. I read it, I highlighted it, it's dog-eared. I mean, that book it was my Bible.
Mm-hmm.
And what I really loved about it was that it helped me not feel so alone. Because here I feel like everybody else I know has a beautiful relationship with their children and their dogs.
Yeah.
And I have, Cujo over there, who's my baby. Meanwhile, now when Brody nipped the toddler, 100% my fault. It was my fault that I put Brody in that situation, and I didn't recognize his stress signals, and I didn't recognize the trigger stacking. So again, we're very lucky that nobody was seriously injured, and we were all able to learn from this.
Mm-hmm.
So what I really, loved about the book was, one, that it made me feel not so alone, and two, is that it had really concrete management options for us. She talked about physical separation, at all times. Now, when they're a newborn, me holding the baby and the dog on the floor is that's good enough to need a barrier.
Yeah.
But I was really nervous for when the baby started moving. And I know that it was really difficult, because I know that dogs feel off of our energy. And so, I had all this anxiety in me, and I would make myself more anxious, being like, you can't be anxious around the dog.
So how did you handle things once your baby became mobile?
We have a small house, but it is sort of an open floor plan. And I needed to find a way to keep everyone safe within the confines of the realities of my house. So we bought a 6-panel play yard and, a cheap little rug, and put it under there, and that was good. While the baby learned to sit and roll and cruise a little bit. And then when he started walking, I was like, he's going to need some more room. I'll back up a little bit. We decided to, we called it his gated community. We decided to contain the baby as opposed to the dog, because my dog is anxious and he panics when he's confined.
I was going to ask what made you decide that. And I like that you recognize that for your dog, confinement anxiety is a really very real phenomenon, and that for you, and you had a small enough dog that the dog could have free reign of the house and you could contain your kiddo instead.
Right. I mean, and that's the other thing is Brody had proven himself capable of having free reign of the house.
Right.
My baby had not.
And then you expanded the pen once your kiddo became more mobile, yeah?
Yes, we did. We bought another set, so another 6 panels, and got rid of the kitchen table. And it was like we had this giant play yard in the eating area,
right,
with this little narrow path to like get around it to get to the mudroom, or to the backyard for the dog.
Right.
It was a pain in the butt. It was in the way. It was obnoxious. I hated it. Um, and I had a lot of like, why am I the only one? Like, how come I have this dog that, I don't trust around small children?
Yeah.
Well, now I know that you should never trust any dog around small children. It's not that they're not good dogs, it's that they're animals.
And they have teeth.
So,
I want to interject real quick because I think what you're feeling or what you were feeling is totally normal about, how can I be the only one? And Lisa's book normalizes that and makes you feel like you're not. But the other thing that I just want to point out, and you know this now, but a lot of people who hear this may or may not know this, which is that we all realize on some level that the reality that people put forth on social media and on Instagram and Facebook and wherever is a very cultivated, curated reality of what looks good. And very few people are really, really honest about what life actually looks like. And so what we're seeing is a combination of unsafe things that people are sharing. Look at my kid sitting on my dog, and oh my gosh, like all the stuff that I have all these new gray hairs since I started looking up these things. But like honestly, the idea that people are sharing only the perfect moments makes the rest of us really question our own skills, makes us question our dog, makes us not love our dog actually as much as we used to love our dog. And that's one of my goals really, is to help parents love their dog again and feel normal and feel like they've got that they're empowered the way that Lisa's book empowered you, is that we've got this community of people who are in the trenches together, and it is normal. What we're going through is normal, and what we're seeing online is not normal.
Right.
And I would love for us to change that dialogue and normalize what is safe versus what is not safe. And so I hate that you felt at the time that you were the only one whose dog was Cujo, when in reality, I guarantee that there were other people whose dogs put their ears back, licked their lips, yawned, looked away, moved away, all of the things, maybe even growled or nipped, and they're not talking about it because it's embarrassing.
Right.
And it's hard and it's sad.
And you brought up a good point about, learning to love your dog again. I did. I spent, and I know that this is really normal, even if you don't have a dog who's anxious or, around children, or anxious in general, is, I was like, my life would be so much easier if I didn't have this dog. I always joke that before I had my baby, I would die for my dog. And now I'm like, oh my God, this dog. Like, get him out.
They drive you.
And so I had a lot of resentment toward him. Like, what is wrong with you? Why can't you just be like a normal dog? Why are you so worked up? And then it's like, well, I could say the same thing about me. It's not his fault. It's not our fault.
And you have to work with the dog in front of you as opposed to what you wish that dog was.
Absolutely.
Because I have had dogs where I wish they were something different, and I had to shift my expectations of what that dog was capable of doing so that I could then be pleased with their delivery, right? Their existence. It's like, okay, well, then I'm going to stop taking you out into the world because it doesn't seem very fun for you, or you seem a lot more worried. So let's do stuff around the house instead. And that's just your reality. But maybe with a different dog, they have a different reality.
Right. And that was one of the, learning to accept Brody for who he was. We can't take him on family trips, and he hates the car. He hates strange places. He is so much happier being at home with a dog sitter when we go somewhere. And I felt really guilty about that. I'm leaving him home. He's supposed to be part of our family. And it's like, he's still a part of our family. He just, he prefers the peace and quiet of his own house. And so, sort of honoring Brody and his personality and his needs has made a big difference as to how I feel about him.
Right.
So
I like that.
So we expanded the play area. We got rid of our kitchen table. We ate on the couch for 2.5 years. I had this little fold up high chair that I would bring out into the living room.
Yeah.
And we just started doing more, well, I should rewind a little bit. When my baby was probably like 7 or 8 months, so Lisa Edwards, who wrote the book, actually lives close to us. So I was very lucky to be able to call her and set up an appointment. She came to our house a few times, and we really worked on, she was able to observe our setup, give some pointers, maybe try this instead. You can do this, that, and work with Brody on, because another thing with Brody is that he has FOMO.
Yeah.
And he has FOMO. If I was in the play yard with my baby and he was right on the other side, could see me, same room, he would not be happy. He would bark, he would whine, he would paw at the gate. So we had to find a way to work with him to make him comfortable. Again, even though we were in the same room, to have him be comfortable on the other side of the gate. And not right with us. So we did a lot of work with Lisa, keeping him settle on a mat. We use that, what's it called? The treat and train.
Treat and train.
We used that for a little while to help him, get used to and thinking that settling on his mat was a good thing. And the other thing we started doing is that he really only complained when one of us was in the play yard with the baby. Like, I put the baby in the play yard and I was making dinner, he was fine. So he didn't like being separated from me or my husband.
Right.
So we started, we buy like the really big bully sticks or, just something really awesome. And so every time we were separated from him by a gate or the play yard or something, boom, out comes the delicious treat. And then the minute we come out, it goes away.
Yeah.
So that helped a lot too. He did still complain because he's a princess and he complains, but it got a lot better. It was more short-lived. He would just sort of like voice his opinion and then move on.
So what you're doing there is you're changing how he's feeling. So essentially the goal of those kinds of behaviors and training is you don't like when I'm separated from you, so I'm going to try to help you be less sad about that. By giving you something really nice to do instead of worry. And for those people who don't know what a treat and train is, it's a remote treat dispenser, so that you either have a remote control and the dispenser is on the other side of the gate, maybe next to his mat, and you can click a button and the treat will deliver to the dog for staying on the mat while you are elsewhere. So there are a variety of different types of devices like this, and it really helps to get work done where you can't hand the dog a treat, or I have bad aim, so some people might be able to throw a treat and have it land on the mat. Mine go all over the place, which defeats the purpose, because then my dog is chasing the treat.
Right.
So having something that's a more specifically targeted, aimed treat delivery system tends to work really well with that kind of thing.
So that did help a lot. Some of the other things that we worked with were we taught him out you go. So for us, out you go is, make space. Move over there and the hand signal. Can't say hand signal.
No, I know it. Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah.
And it's so cute now. My son is now 3 and he'll go, out you go, out you go.
So cute.
Of course, the dog doesn't listen to him, but no. So we taught him out you go, just to create space. And we also started, Lisa suggested we do, I forget the term for it, but whenever the baby did something concerning, cry or squeal or, whatever, I would just say, look at that. And then like treat immediately with that treat. So look at that. Look at even that, even if it was a noise, look at that. And that sort of became the cue for like, everything's cool. This is fine. Something happened. No big deal.
Yes.
So we worked a lot.
I use that strategy a lot when I'm working with families whose dogs are reactive on leash, or who want to chase squirrels or scooters or bicycles or whatever, or you're worried about a man in a hat. And the idea of that is similar to what we call the engage disengage game, where you look at the trigger and we reward the dog for looking at it, because we don't want it to constantly be like, look at me, look at me, look at me, because then we're getting a dog who's afraid to scan the world and
Mhm.
see what's out there. And it's great if you want to look at a trigger and not lose your mind about it. Amazing.
Mhm.
So we can reward the dog for looking at the thing, but then you up it a notch. And what we do then is we encourage the dog, that you could be like, oh, did you see that? And the dog looks at it. And then the next step is, then we reward the dog for
Mhm.
choosing to look away from that thing,
Yeah.
right? So I can share the file for how to play that game. I do think it's a wonderful strategy with a screaming baby, that what we do is that screaming baby can now predict treats.
It
So
got to the point where every time the baby would cry, cough, whatever, the dog would come and sit next to my feet and look at me. I kept
wonderful.
treats in containers in every room. There were dog treats in every room of the house, so that I always had them nearby. Um, he would follow me while I went to change the baby's diaper, settle at my feet. Great. I would, be wiping one hand, I'm dropping treats with the other. The poor
You're
dog
usually
being like 4 pounds.
the only changing table next to the diaper cream is a jar of dog cookies.
Pretty much.
I think all parents should have that. Actually, I think that's a really good strategy.
When we took the dog for his physical, the baby was like, I don't know, like 5 or 6 months old. And they were like, he's put on some weight. I'm like, yeah, well.
I do encourage people, when your dog has, especially small dogs, and
Yeah.
Pippin, I don't know, he's somewhere around me. He's a small guy. He's about 15, 16 pounds. And it's so easy to overfeed them. And so I try to separate out his food for the day and then take treats out of that
Mhm.
container, so that it's not extra. But I can totally see how you could just plump up your dog so easily.
Yeah. I mean, at that point, it's like I had no more space. I was like, fine, I know you shouldn't gain 4 pounds. It came back off, but
Yeah, I know.
I was like, we both got baby weight. Um,
You only have so much bandwidth. I mean, you got to do what you got to do. Right?
exactly. And that's a lot of it, is that it's okay to just survive a lot of the time.
Yes.
And, I felt all this pressure, like I have to create this environment where my dog and my baby will be soulmates. And it's like, no, you don't. No, you don't. You have to keep everybody safe. You have to feed everybody. And that's pretty
You
much it.
just have to keep them alive and not bitten. And that's
Yeah.
it. That's
Yeah.
literally, that's it. And that's why it's funny, because that's why in the membership I have stage 1 is surviving. You
Mhm.
gotta survive. Let's figure out how to get you through the day.
Yes.
And then eventually we'll get the other stuff taken care of. But right now, you don't have to beat yourself up over it. Let's buy you some equipment. I'll help you set it up. You'll give me a little house tour. I joke that I'm like one part interior designer, one part therapist, one part dog trainer. Like, it is what it is, right?
Mhm.
But surviving is crucial, because you just have to get through it. And then you have to decide, okay, I can actually keep my dog. Maybe I'll like my dog again one day. But right now I can do this. I can get through the day.
Mhm. And I have, well-meaning friends and family. I heard a lot of either you need to get rid of the dog because he's going to eat your whole family, or they'll figure it out. Just put them in a room together and they'll figure it out. I'm like, the answer has got to be somewhere in between.
I hear both of those all the time. They'll figure it out. I was invited to share like a question in a in a maternity nurse Facebook group. And I was allowed to ask, what are your top concerns when you work with clients who have dogs? Like, because I want to make sure that the baby professionals feel supported, but also that they know how to help their clients who undoubtedly will ask them questions like, how do I keep my dog and baby safe, right? And a woman literally this morning said, I've never had a problem with a baby because all animals always accept the new family member. And I was like, oh no, because, and I said, that's a really dangerous misconception. And it's not safe for your clients to believe that to be true. Because and then I said, honestly, if that were true, I wouldn't be in business. Nobody would call me. Nobody would pay me $1 if that was true. Because then all dogs and kids would get along just fine. And that is absolutely not the case. Because just yesterday, I had to tell a woman that she should rehome her dog because it bites kids. It's not true. It's not true at all. And so we need to counteract this misconception and this horrible advice that people give you. I mean, they're well-meaning, maybe that person has never encountered a dog who's bitten kids before.
Right.
And maybe it's always worked out, kind of like I walked uphill both ways in the snow to school 6 miles and I turned out fine. It's the same old thing. Like we
Right.
survived, you'll survive kind of
But
mentality.
when we do better, we do better.
Exactly. And none of that offers any support to the person who's asking for it. It's just like, what are you worried about? And it's so dismissive, and people deserve more support than that. So I'm so glad you found Lisa's book. And I love Lisa's book. When I found it, I read it cover to cover, and I was like, I had my highlighter out just like you. And I was like, this book is amazing.
Like, she's so nice. Like, she's a really, really sweet person. She was helpful and supportive, never made us feel bad. She asked me about the nipping incident, and we talked about it, and it made me upset.
Yeah.
And at no point did I feel shamed or, because, in her book, she had a biter, a dog who bit.
Yeah.
And she really helped me come to terms with, like, my dog is not a bad dog. He didn't do that because he's a bad dog. He did that because he was in a situation where he didn't feel safe. And it's my responsibility to make sure that he feels safe.
Right.
So sort of reframing it like that, as not like I have to keep them separate, but as I'm keeping them separate for them.
Right. And what you're essentially doing is you're setting your dog up to have better feelings so he never feels compelled to use his teeth. Right? Because if he feels better, he'll act better. It's really as simple as that. But the problem is so few of us know how to help him feel better, or even what it looks like if he doesn't feel good in the first place. Right? There's so many subtle signs that you now know and you're very fluent in, but a lot of people don't even recognize that a dog yawning is a sign of stress.
Yeah.
I mean, we would see a dog yawning and say the dog is tired or the dog needs a nap. I mean, that's obviously one very logical guess, but yawning can be a sign of stress, right? Same with licking the lips and all kinds of other things.
And, putting it all together, like, again, I have a Boston Terrier, so he's got buggy eyes. His ears stick up all the time. He doesn't really have a tail. He has a nub. So it's like, you really have to look at the entire body and see what they're doing and what situation they're in. Again, if he's sleeping on the couch and wakes up and yawns, that's normal.
Absolutely.
If his eyes are bugging it, they're just buggy.
It's not because
he's really use your eyes a lot
right
for the ears, but you just sort of learn to read your dog. So
it's a whole package situation. And then you learn to look at the scene. So now I'm at the point, of course, and you are too, where you see something in your dog and you go, what could have caused that? Right? Like, oh, okay, I see you yawned. Oh, there's a noisy toy my son is playing with over there. That's interesting, right? And so one of the activities that I like to try to have people go through is a dog body language scavenger hunt, where it's trying to get people to look around them, right? So when I see my dog start to lick his lips, I'm going to do a quick scan of the environment, and I'm going to notice that the smoke detector started beeping because the battery is low. Oh, okay, right? You start to notice these little things like that it's really a whole picture type of situation. Nothing lives in isolation.
No. And learning, again, you can't, it's easier said than done to be proactive with toddlers and dogs, because it's like, you don't know what they can do until they do it. But, I know that when my son gets wound up after dinner and starts doing laps around the house, the dog is going to want to chase him. And so I'm quick to, nip it in the bud. Let's do something else. Let's do a puzzle, or let's go up in your room and shut the door and you can run around there.
Yes.
We do some, even just today, my husband's working, I'm off with my son, and the dog got all worked up about something. And I'm like, out you go, take him in the office, shut the door. We need to be separate right now. And that doesn't mean that neither of them are treasured members of the family, it means we need to create some space right now.
Yeah, it's also what you just said, though. I want to go back for a second, because you did say something that is really, really important, which is to identify an alternate behavior that you want someone to do. So with your son, maybe it's, we're going to run around in your room and do some kind of work, play tag in your room, as opposed to playing tag out here. So you're in this constant state of redirection, that you're either redirecting the dog and saying, hey, I'd rather you do this instead, or you're redirecting your toddler, I'd rather you do this instead. But none of it's punishment based, right? You're not saying, stop it, bad, whatever. And that's so negative and not constructive. But instead you're like, hey, I see you want to run around and play a game. That's great. Let's go do it over here. Right. And that's how learning really happens best. And there's been a lot of studies about, learning in the brain, and positive learning versus punishment. And, and it's always that the data is super solid that punishment it inhibits learning rather than helps learning. So teaching alternate behaviors and being able to give yourself permission to come up with alternatives, I think, and you're doing that really nicely, I think is really important. It's just another thing to add to your already overwhelmed list, which is hard. But once you get there, and that's kind of what the progress that I hope to help people with over time is that, all right, first let's get through the day, then let's get up the baby gates, then let's do this, then let's do that. And then eventually let's come up with an alternate behavior for your kid. When your kid starts shooting a Nerf gun at the dog, okay, let's make a target together and let's shoot that instead, right? So alternate behaviors constantly, so that you can then reward behavior you want repeated.
Yes. To give yourself permission and forgiveness to, have to tweak your lifestyle, to tweak your home. And it doesn't mean, again, that you have a bad dog or you have a bad toddler. It means you have a very young human and an animal, as the best dogs there are, they're animals. And so to have, just to give yourself some grace, and that it's okay if it looks a little messy as long as it works. Was my house a total disaster for 2.5 years? Yeah, kind of, but nobody got bit, so win.
That is a win.
Yeah,
I agree.
And then our motto for coexisting was like inclusion without interacting. So we really tried to do a lot of, again, with the counter conditioning, like anytime we spent time with the baby, lots of praise, some treats, a fun toy, just anytime the baby was around, we would read stories to the baby and have the dog on the floor in a settle. Lots of family walks. So we really tried to make it so that the dog felt that he was still included and still part of the family and not left out. Even though on the other side of a gate in the same room, he felt left out.
It's still together. It is still together. I mean, there's a lot of time that you're doing things like reading a bedtime story to your toddler, and your dog, if your dog is well behaved enough, can lay at your feet. That's great family time. You know, I mean, I think that's wonderful. Even if you were sitting on the couch, which I've seen great pictures of you, where it's dog, mom, toddler, right? You're in between. You're all together. You can be petting the dog. You can be tickling your kiddo. You're in the middle. You're blocking any negative stuff. And now you've gotten to the point, because you've built such positive associations, that your son, I've seen lots of great photos and stuff of your son hanging out and Brody laying nearby without a pen in between. Of course, you're right there. You're not leaving the room. You're not even taking a step away. But the fact that now Brody he feels safe. His mental state. He's also older and more mature than he was originally, but still he's in a comfortable enough place where he can lay down and trust that you will prevent your toddler from doing anything inappropriate to him.
And of course, because nothing is 100%, right? Like, you can have the best management techniques that'll work 99 out of 100 times, but that one time, I think that's where a lot of the counter conditioning and the positive association really helped. For instance, I think I posted this in the group. My son was jumping on the couch and fell off and fell right on the dog. And the dog just kind of looked at me like, what the heck was that? And then put his head back down and went, and I was like, jackpot treats, party, party. That was great. Whoa, you're so good. And I think he was just more confused than anything. And obviously that doesn't mean that my son has free reign to jump on the dog. Of course not. But
that was an accident. It wasn't.
It was exactly. But that's what I'm saying, is that for the times that accidents happen,
yes,
now my dog doesn't see him as a threat all the time, so
right.
he's more tolerant of like an accident or a mistake. Yeah. Again, we work very hard to make sure that doesn't happen. Yeah. But I feel comfortable knowing that right. Brody does feel safe and is starting to really form a bond and a trust with my son.
Yeah. I don't know if you've heard Brene Brown before, but she's just such a wonderful, inspirational speaker about grace and giving yourself permission and dealing with shame and failure and all of those things, which we're all dealing with in this particular situation. But she told a story one time about a marble jar. And she talked about this with her daughter, about how, like in preschool or kindergarten, the teacher will often have a marble jar where when the kids do good things, they put the marbles in the jar, and then the jar fills up with marbles of good experiences, right? And I feel like the way that you have set up your life with Brody is that you are giving him marbles of good experiences and positive experiences, so that when one thing, the falling or the tripping and stepping on your foot or whatever, the one thing happens, we don't lose all the marbles, right, of trust. We have this whole jar of history, a bank filled with positive inputs and deposits. And so when an accident happens, even if you have to withdraw from that marble jar, you're not taking everything out, and there's still more goodness than badness, right?
I read an analogy like that, where you're making deposits every day into the trust account, and then exactly. You need to pull from it. It's there.
Yeah. It really resonated with me as a former teacher. I that was something I could fully understand and relate to, that, you're setting your dog up to trust that, we've had enough positive interactions that I know that I'm going to be safe moving forward. Yeah. I think that's super important.
And I still, I still sometimes can't believe that. I want to go back in time and tell myself, you're going to figure it out. It's going to be okay. There's a lot of stress and tears and second guessing, and what am I doing? And am I screwing up I was remember crying, like, he's never going to run because I have him in a pen all the time. It's like, he runs. And just, again, having grace with yourself and saying, you know what, this is my situation. These are the steps that I'm going to take to keep everybody safe. Other people and their opinions can buzz off. And just trust that with the support and the skills, you'll get through it. Now, that's not to say that, we're in the clear. No. He's 3, he's a terror. Sometimes when he'll have a meltdown over nothing, and Brody sort of just gives me a side eye, and then we'll go upstairs or he'll just be like, I can't. And he'll just, but it's good. He'll very calmly remove himself from the room.
And you're like, I wish I could walk out of the room. Just like, I can't either, but I have to deal with it. It's still my responsibility.
I'm like, I know you're having big feelings right now.
Yeah. I do think what you said is interesting. And I like that you acknowledged the fact that just because it's okay right now doesn't mean it will always be. I think that people will, and this is the same with dog training, people are very excited to sign up for puppy training, and then they stop because they get the 1 or 2 behaviors that they think they need. And that's true. And for that moment, they may have everything they need. But then later down the line, we may have, a variety of issues that become problematic. And so it never really stops, just like education in a human never really stops, or, you know, as you are raising a child, there are developmental stages that are constantly happening, just as your dog is having developmental stages that are constantly happening. And so you have to do everything you can to support them individually and then collectively, you know, as a family. So it is something that takes ongoing support. And that's why I'm so happy to be here for you guys, to hopefully be a source of that, or at least, you know, moral support, pats on the back, like, and then, you know, training advice when appropriate and needed. I think it helps.
Well, the other thing is that, you know, when we adopted Brody, he was a year and a half old. And in the surrender form, they said, loves kids, loves kids. We're like, great, he loves kids. Okay, well, now it's 4 years later. You know, we had him around my nieces and nephews, but they were older children, dog savvy children. So obviously that's different than a newborn or toddler. And it's like, just because they like something one day, it's not like he was born with this innate sense of loving children. You know, maybe he liked children or babies when he was a year old, but now he's 5 and
yeah, they're entitled to their own opinion, you know.
Right. And you know, we didn't have him around babies and small children because we just didn't. So we didn't have that exposure over the 4 years in between when we adopted him and when we had our son. Yeah. And that's huge. That was a hard lesson that I had to learn, was that, you know, things change, and you know, it's sort of like you have to have ongoing education. Mm-hmm. Or exposures, positive exposures to these things. You know, it's not like he liked one baby and now he likes all babies.
Yeah, that's very true. That's a really good point.
And then, you know, I always want to give a hug when I read these, and I sigh a little bit when people say like, oh, we brought our baby home and the dog just loves him and it's going so great and I was so worried for nothing. And I'm like, listen, a newborn to most dogs is boring. It's when they start moving and talking and all sorts of things. You know, Brody's anxiety was better, you know, after we started treating him with Prozac. And then for a couple of months, then my baby started moving and it brought it all back up again. It's sort of like the newborn part isn't even the hard part. It is, but
it's,
you know,
it's hard in different ways.
And yeah, but I really want to caution against sort of a false sense of security. If your baby is 2 or 3 weeks old and your dog is doing great, that's great. You know, maybe your dog will be fine, but I always assume that my dog is not going to be fine in a situation. Not to be, you know, a pessimist or anything, but I try to come at it from that angle, like assuming he's not going to be okay. What can I do to ensure he will be okay, rather than feel too overconfident the other way.
Yeah, I mean, I would much prefer somebody be proactive and just assume the worst and prepare, and as opposed to reacting or maybe being too late or something else.
Yeah,
I think that that's really important, and I think we have to walk a fine line between being cautionary and sounding like a pessimist, or somebody that people then say, I'm not listening because you're being too negative. Like, let me take this moment. And you're like, yeah, but it's a misguided moment, right?
Well, that's the thing. Like, you can enjoy the momentary, you know, the win in the moment, but don't lose sight of, you know, it's a marathon. I mean, you know, I've only been parenting for 3 years, but that's a marathon. Dog, it's all a marathon. And when people would say to me, you know, you still have your kid in the pen and you still don't let them run around the backyard together, and I'm like, it's a marathon. Mm-hmm. You know, I would rather them take 4 or 5 years to really bond than have a mistake made.
Well, and it's, you know, your dog is different, right? I mean, their dog might be a totally different dog, and it might be okay to just have a long leash dragging as a safety precaution. Every dog is different, but
Mm-hmm.
you are doing this because Brody is the dog that you're living with.
Yep.
And they can do it their way. It may or may not work out, but it is a combination of knowing the dog you're living with and knowing the child you're living with, but remembering that both of them can be unpredictable and both of them are not capable developmentally of making sound decisions much of the time.
Right.
And so that's what you have to be there for. You can't just hope for the best and, open the door and let them go play in the backyard alone. That's just not a safe or responsible way to have them interact.
Yeah. I mean, this was the first year. So I'm trying to think. My son was about 2.5 when we finally, we didn't even get rid of the play yard right away. We sort of phased it out. Like we removed a panel so that, it was open and could go in and out. And then we sort of opened it up a little more. And I was very nervous about that. But I was like, all right, well, just baby steps. And I think that they might have been, I don't want to say ready, but I think I might have been the one holding back a little bit, but again, anxiety. And so this was the first summer that they really were able to run around together. Cause like I shared in the group, we even brought those play yard panels outside onto the deck. Which again, a lot of it was still like, I'm going to corral my baby. Like, I don't want him to go face first into a rose bush. I trust my dog to not do that.
Yeah, exactly.
And so, it was a little bit of a learning curve for everybody, we have this freedom and we are near each other, but I think that the management and the skills that we've learned as far as dog body language and that kind of thing really set us up for success in giving everyone a little more freedom and a little more direct interaction.
Well, thank you for taking this time. I know that it's so hard to get time away when you've got a dog and a toddler at home. I really, really appreciate this. Your experience in the trenches is invaluable, and what you have learned shows that you can emerge on the other side intact, and that it's a process. It's not just something that's going to happen, and that you can give yourself permission to take the time that you need to figure it out over time and figure out what works for you. And to just keep asking around until you get the support that you need from the right person, because, again, plenty of bad advice out there. So
Yes, a lot of bad advice. We actually, real quick, we were recommended before the nipping incident, when I thought the dog was going to eat the baby, somebody recommended a trainer to us, and he came to our house, and the first thing he did was say, you need to, when your dog's lying down on the floor, you need to like push him aside with your foot like 5 or 6 times an hour. Don't let him on the couch. Don't let him on the bed. And I was like, what? The whole dominance, pack, claiming, all of it. It's, ooh.
Yeah.
And I basically was like, get out of my house. This can't be the way. To find Lisa, to find you, and have that support with positive reinforcement, positive training, it takes a weight off. It really does, because it's hard. It's really, really hard. And there are still some days where I'm like, I'm going to sell both of you. Like, or forget, I'll sell myself. Like,
I'm leaving. I'm packing a suitcase.
I'm going to find my own island. So I think having this sense of community is a big one, to know that you're not alone. You're not the only one who might have a difficult situation to deal with.
Thank you. I think that's a perfect place to leave it. I appreciate you so much.
Oh, thank you.
If you haven't already, please subscribe to the Pooch Parenting Podcast on iTunes or on the podcast app of your choice. If you're looking for ongoing support for your family with dogs, be sure to get on the waiting list for my Thriving Parents with Kids and Dogs membership at www.safekidsanddogs.com. And don't forget to follow Pooch Parenting on Instagram or Facebook. Thanks for listening.